Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a totally fascinating intersection of global trade, environmental policy, and believe it or not, bleeding-edge technology. We're going to explore the hidden mechanics of the Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth does international waste management have to do with advanced artificial intelligence and smartphone hardware? Well, as it turns out, literally everything. We're going to see exactly how chaotic construction waste gets transformed into a highly valuable asset right smack in the middle of a massive geopolitical trade friction. Here's the roadmap for today. First, we'll map out the geopolitical choke point. Then we'll dive into the 500 millisecond AI gatekeeper. After that, it's explainable compliance and output. And finally, we'll wrap up with securing the bioeconomy. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The geopolitical choke point, mapping the cross-border waste corridor. Okay, to really grasp the technology here, we've got to understand the physical landscape first. And we are talking about a mind-boggling scale of logistics. Every single year, a staggering 3.46 million tons of municipal solid waste, that's MSW, are exported from Ontario, Canada and shipped right across the U.S. border into Michigan landfills. Picture this. On any given weekday morning, there's a continuous rolling queue of over 200 transport trucks crossing the Windsor-Detroit Ambassador Bridge and the Sarnia-Port Huron Blue Water Bridge. It's just a massive, highly integrated cross-border trade pipe.
And this really puts things into perspective, showing just how dependent Michigan's waste infrastructure actually is on this constant flow. That 3.46 million tons of Canadian trash, it makes up a whopping 14.35% of all the waste buried in Michigan landfills. To put that in context, if Ontario were a U.S. state, it would easily be a top 3 supplier of Michigan's waste. But obviously it's not a state, it's a foreign country. And that makes this massive flow subject to some seriously intense international trade scrutiny.
So why is all this happening? Well, it boils down to extreme economic arbitrage. The cost to dump a ton of waste in the Greater Toronto area right now sits at a floor of about $189.86. But hop over to Michigan and the accept site tipping fee is an incredibly low 36 cents per ton. Yeah, you heard that right, 36 cents. That is a massive price gap. Even with Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer proposing a 1,300% hike to bring that fee up to $5 a ton, the total delivered rate to the U.S. would still only climb to around $40. That's still less than a quarter of what it costs in Ontario. So economically speaking, the math overwhelmingly favors keeping this corridor wide open.
But while the economics are stable, the politics, incredibly volatile. Just look at the timeline so far this year. Back in January 2026, Ontario faced the blue box collapse, which forced commercial waste into private streams. Then in February, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the use of emergency tariffs. That move prompted the Washington administration, under Donald Trump, to activate Section 122 of the Trade Act, slapping a 15% global tariff surcharge on things. Now, reacting to all this uncertainty, Ontario Premier Doug Ford passed Bill 5 in April. This bypassed environmental assessments to fast-track the Dresden landfill expansion. And Ford's on-record rationale was explicitly about protecting Ontario's disposal capacity, just in case the Trump administration closes the border to Ontario's garbage. And looming right around the corner, on August 19th, Washington is scheduled to apply a severe 50% duty under Section 338 on finished Canadian wood and paper products. Plus, the overarching USMCA, or CUSMA as it's called up in Canada, is going through a 10-year wind-down review. Simply put, the cross-border regulatory environment is seeing unprecedented volatility right now.
Section 2. The 500 millisecond AI gatekeeper, the 905 Wood Digital Refinery. So how exactly does a company survive in such a heavily scrutinized, highly tariffed supply chain? Well, they do it by engineering a brilliant micro-level technological counterplay. And the absolute key here is that this 905 Wood Digital Refinery isn't running on some massive remote server farm. It's happening right at the edge. We're talking about a Google Pixel 10 Pro smartphone running Android 16. It leverages its internal Tensor G5 chip to execute really complex AI logic directly on the phone, right out in the field, totally bypassing the cloud. It's literally like having a domain-specific supercomputer tucked in your pocket, powered by the Light RT AI stack, and running completely independent of Wi-Fi or cellular networks.
This piece of hardware powers a lightning-fast 12-stage workflow. In Stage 1, a truck driver captures high-resolution imagery of that chaotic construction waste. Then, Stage 2 is where the magic really happens. The Tensor G5 runs the Gemma 4 E2B model to classify that waste in under 500 milliseconds, less than half a second. Stage 3 then introduces what they call amber band thresholding. Here's how it works. If the AI gives a confidence score between 70 and 85%, which, is pretty typical for weathered wood that might be hiding chemical preservatives, it triggers a precautionary branch. If the score is under 70%, it just kicks it straight to a manual inspection.
Okay, but what happens to those ambiguous amber band loads? Well, if a secondary on-device AI model called the Visual Fallacy Guard happens to disagree with the primary model, the load gets flagged for physical validation. At that point, automated near-infrared and X-ray fluorescent sensors step in to scan the physical wood fibers for heavy metals, looking for things like chromated copper arsenate, which are these highly toxic chemicals that were historically used to treat wood. All of that raw spectrometadata is then ingested right back into the 905 Wood system.
And this perfectly illustrates the strict regulatory adjudication that's happening in real time. A massive 26 billion parameter GEMMA 4 model evaluates all those sensor findings against the strict statutory limits of the Toxicity Characteristic Leaching Procedure, or TCLP. For instance, if arsenic goes over 2.5 milligrams per liter, or if lead and chromium exceed 5.0, that clean wood routing is instantly revoked. No questions asked. The system automatically generates a hazardous waste manifest on the spot and dispatches a specialized carrier. It completely takes human error out of the equation when it comes to environmental compliance.
Section 3. Explainable compliance and output. Generating the paper trail.
Now, processing AI at the edge is incredibly cool, but let's be real. International customs agencies need a legally defensible paper trail. So the linchpin of this whole operation is the cryptographic hold-to-seal audit. The truck driver literally just holds a physical screen button on their Pixel 10 Pro for 2 seconds. That simple physical action triggers the phone's Titan M2 secure element. It creates a tamper-evident cryptographic envelope that seals the GPS coordinates down to a 1-meter radius, the kernel hash, the specific AI model version that's active, and a timestamp. Basically, it creates ironclad court-admissible evidence of exactly what state the material was in at the very moment of intake.
From there, all of this super secure data is compiled by the Digital Refinery's application UI/UX into a unified, cryptographically signed PDF documentation package. And this includes the absolutely crucial USMCA Shield Certificate of Origin under HS Code 3825.0. This specific piece of documentation acts as a literal firewall. By classifying the verified clean wood properly, it stays tariff-exempt, completely sidestepping those looming 50% duties from Washington. The app also spits out electronic manifests, request for quote, and zero-levy report cards for corporate auditing, and those highly valuable puro.earth registry entries.
Which brings us to Section 4, Securing the Bioeconomy, the Sentient Bridge. Let's zoom back out for a second. What is the ultimate outcome of piecing all this massive geopolitics and microtech together? It creates what they call a sentient bridge. By operationalizing the Google Pixel 10 Pro and the LiteRT AI stack, the 905 Wood system is acting as a sentient connector. It takes this totally chaotic, unregulated construction waste and meticulously validates it into the high-purity feedstock that the global circular bioeconomy desperately needs. It is quite literally a bridge between a disposal liability and a high-margin asset, ultimately securing Ontario's industrial leadership in this massive global space.
And here is exactly why this matters financially. When a load of wood is cryptographically verified as clean and exempt from trade tariffs, it doesn't just get dumped into some cheap landfill down in Michigan. Instead, it gets routed for pyrolysis, which turns it into biochar. That verified clean wood actually generates a premium $2,721 carbon dividend per mothership on voluntary carbon markets. It is pure financial alchemy, and it's made possible solely because an AI running at the edge could definitively prove the material was safe and legally compliant.
So the biggest takeaway from this explainer is just the sheer scalability of this whole concept. We are looking at a solution where a smartphone literally navigates international trade wars, shields cross-border assets from 50% tariffs, and redefines municipal solid waste into carbon gold. It leaves us with a pretty powerful question. If Edge AI and a secure element can manage the insane complexities of the Ontario-Michigan waste corridor, how will these exact same technologies reshape the hidden regulatory and logistical mechanics of your own global supply chain? The technology is already here, folks, and it fits right in the palm of your hand. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll see you in the next explainer.